Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Crime Whisper today. We're diving into Manchester crime stories, uncovering the shadows, secrets, and scandals that shaped the city's darkest chapters. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight in Manchester. Gray skies weighed heavy over the red-bricked terraces, and the canals ran black with filth and secrets in this city. Crime wasn't an accident. It was a currency. It flowed through the alleys, pubs, and betting shops like blood through veins. Detective Inspector Callum Briggs knew that better than anyone. 20 years on the force had shown him the underbelly of Manchester, and it was uglier than most could imagine tonight, though. He wasn't chasing ghosts or breaking up pub fights tonight. He was standing over a corpse. The warehouse on the edge of Ancoats smelled of rust and damp concrete. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the body sprawled on the floor. Male, mid-30s, tracksuit, tattoos running up his neck. His skull was bashed in with something heavy. "Another one," muttered Sergeant Julie Harper, her voice flat. She had been with Briggs long enough to know when not to show weakness. Briggs crouched beside the corpse. "This one isn't random. Look at the ink." Julie leaned closer. On the man's neck was a tattoo of a snarling bulldog, the symbol of the Rusholme Dogs, a notorious street crew known for drug running and debt collecting that makes 3 in 2 weeks. Julie said, "Someone's hunting them." Briggs stood, his knees cracking. "And whoever it is, they're making a point across town, in a smoky back room of a pub in Moss Side." A different conversation was taking place, said Eddie Doyle. Once the quiet kid who ran errands for older boys was now the man people whispered about when debts went unpaid at He had built his name not through loyalty but through ruthlessness. The Rusholme Dogs had controlled the south side of Manchester for years, but Eddie saw cracks in their armor. "You hear about Tommy?" one of his lieutenants asked, pouring whiskey into a chipped glass. Eddie nodded slowly. "Word is, he got his head split open by who?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Eddie leaned back in his chair, the smoke curling around his face. "Dogs are falling, one by one. Could be police, could be rivals, doesn't matter. What matters is, we step in before someone else does." The men around the table exchanged wary glances. Everyone knew Eddie was ambitious. Everyone also knew that ambition in Manchester often ended in a shallow grave. D grinned, showing his gold tooth. "This city's for the taking, and I intend to take it." Briggs tossed the paper on his desk. Headlines, sold papers. Not truth. The truth was murkier. He knew the Rusholme Dogs had enemies everywhere. Rival crews, bitter even people they'd extorted over the years. But 3 murders in such quick succession meant strategy, not chaos. Julie entered, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Forensics came back. Blood spatter suggests a crowbar. Same as the first body. Same killer." Briggs muttered. He sipped the bitter coffee. "Any witnesses?" "One, a lad who swears he saw someone leaving the warehouse in a black BMW. Couldn't get the plate." Briggs rubbed his forehead. BMWs were as common in Manchester as rain. "What about CCTV?" "Blank cameras were tampered with. That, more than anything, told Briggs they weren't dealing with amateurs." By nightfall, word had spread through the streets. The Rusholme Dogs were bleeding, and every gang in Manchester smelled weakness. Had a shabby cafe near Piccadilly. Eddie Doyle met with a fixer named Malik, a man who thrived on connections and information. Malik was middle-aged, always in tailored suits, his phone buzzing endlessly. "You've been busy, Eddie," Malik said, stirring his tea. Smirked. "Busy keeps the lights on." Malik leaned forward. "Word is, you're behind the Dogs' little disappearances." "Word is wrong," Eddie replied coolly, though his grin betrayed nothing. "But let's say the Dogs are losing ground. A vacuum is opening. Someone has to fill it." Malik's eyes narrowed. "And you think that someone is you?" "I don't think," Eddie said. "I know." Malik tapped his spoon against a cup. "Careful, the Dogs may be limping, but a wounded animal is dangerous. I'm not worried about wounded dogs." Eddie replied, "I'm worried about the coppers." Briggs and Julie drove through home that night, the rain smearing neon lights across the windshield. "Funny thing," Julie said, Flipping through her notes, all 3 victims were enforcers, not dealers. Not runners, enforcers. It's like someone's targeting the muscle. Briggs nodded. Cut off the fists. And the head falls easier. You think it's a rival crew. Has to be, but which one? Too many vultures circling. He pulled the car over outside a pub that buzzed with laughter and shouting. Let's see what the locals are saying inside. The air stank of ale and sweat. Briggs and Julie weren't exactly welcome faces, but fear made tongues loose within minutes. Briggs caught a whisper, a name repeated over and over. Eddie. Doyle. Briggs's gut tightened. He knew Eddie. Everyone did. A man with no allegiances, no code, the kind of criminal who didn't just break rules. He rewrote them. Looks like Doyle's making moves, Julie said as they walked back to the car. Briggs stared into the rain. If he is, then Manchester's about to burn, and burn it did 2 nights later. A petrol bomb tore through a Rusholme dog's safe house. Flames lit up the street as neighbors screamed and fire engines wailed. By morning, the dogs had lost more than soldiers. They had lost face for Eddie Doyle. It was the beginning of an empire for Detective Callum Briggs. It was the beginning of a war. He wasn't sure the city could survive. The city woke to the smell of smoke. The safe house on Claremont Road had burned until the bricks themselves steamed, leaving nothing but ash and the charred skeleton of what once stood. Neighbors claimed they saw masked figures running before the fire started, but fear kept their mouths shut when police knocked on doors. Briggs stood at the edge of the wreckage. Coat collar pulled up against the drizzle. Firefighters moved around him, spraying water on dying embers. The smell clung to his nostrils. Burned wood, melted plastic, and something worse. Julie joined him, her boots crunching on the wet pavement. 3 dead, 2 burned beyond recognition. 1 shot in the back before the flames got him. Briggs exhaled. Professional fire was just the message. Julie glanced at him. Message to who? The dogs. Someone's not just killing them, they're erasing them. By noon, Eddie Doyle sat in a cafe on Dean's Gate, sipping espresso as if nothing in the world could touch him. He liked this place. Clean tables, steady Wi-Fi, people with headphones on who didn't care who he was. Across from him sat Fiona Kavanagh, a solicitor who worked both sides of the law. She was sharp, fearless, and rumored to have half the city's gangsters on speed dial. You're playing a dangerous game, Eddie, she said quietly, sliding a file toward him. Eddie opened it. Inside were property deeds, bank accounts, offshore connections, all the tools for laundering money. His grin widened. Dangerous games, he said, are the only ones worth playing. Fiona leaned back, studying him. You're not satisfied with street power, are you? You want legitimacy, businesses, buildings, contracts. The dogs never had the brains for that. You think you do. Eddie sipped his espresso. I don't think. Fiona, I know Manchester deserves better than a crew of thugs in tracksuits. It needs someone who can run it like a business, and when the dogs strike back. Eddie shrugged. Then we finish what we started. The Rusholme dogs were indeed striking back, but clumsily. A drive-by in Palm missed its target and hit a teenager walking home from the corner shop. Newspapers screamed for justice. Residents demanded action. Brick felt the weight of the city pressing on him. He sat in his office, staring at the incident board covered with photos, maps, and timelines. Every move they make escalates this, Julie said, standing behind him. One more body, and it'll spill out of the estates and into the city center. Briggs rubbed his temple. We need a crack, someone we can flip. A dog who values his skin more than loyalty. Julie smirked. That shouldn't be hard. Their loyalties pay. As if fate heard them, a name landed on their desk an hour later. Kieran Lowe, a 22-year-old dog arrested for possession. He wasn't high-ranking, but he was close enough to know things and terrified enough to talk in the gray interrogation room. Kieran trembled as Briggs and Julie leaned in. Your facing years, Briggs said, but I don't care about your stash. I care about the blood on the streets. You give me names, and maybe you walk. Kieran licked his lips. I can't if I talk. They'll kill me. Julie's voice softened. If you don't, Eddie Doyle will kill you anyway. The dogs are dying. One by one you've seen it. Kieran's eyes darted around the room, like he expected Doyle himself to burst through the door. Finally, he whispered. He's not working alone. He's got someone feeding him info. Briggs stiffened. Who? I don't know, but whoever it is. They know where we stash money, where we meet. Everything like Doyle's inside our heads. Briggs leaned back, processing if Doyle had an informant inside the dogs. That explained everything, but who? And how deep did it go? That night, Briggs parked outside Doyle's known haunter club in the northern quarter called Velvet Room from the outside. It was just another neon-lit bar inside. It was Doyle's kingdom bouncers, dealers, fixers all under his eye. Briggs couldn't go in, not without backup, not without cause, but watching was enough. Doyle moved through the club like he owned it, laughing with men in suits, shaking hands with DJs, slipping envelopes into the right palms. Julie's voice crackled over the radio, spotting him. Briggs lit a cigarette. Yeah, he's smiling like the cat that got the cream, if he's behind the dog's deaths. He's enjoying every minute. Julie hesitated before replying. What if he's untouchable? Look at him, he's not a thug anymore. He's turning into something bigger, something harder to pin down. Briggs blew smoke into the night air. No one's untouchable still. Deep down, he wondered if he was lying to himself. Meanwhile, across the city, the Rushallam dogs gathered in a damp basement. Their numbers were smaller now. Too many funerals, too many defections. Their leader, Tony Bulldog Riley, slammed his fist on the table. This Doyle thinks he can wipe us out. He forgets who built these streets. We own Rushallam, we own Mosside. He's nothing but a pretender, a younger member muttered. He's killing us like flies. Tony's glare silenced him. Then we hit back harder. Tomorrow night, Doyle's gotta meet at the Velvet Room. We torch the place. No survivors. The room buzzed with nervous energy, but fear of Doyle was beginning to outweigh loyalty to the dogs. Several exchanged uncertain glances in the shadows. One man quietly slipped out, phone in hand. 10 minutes later, Eddie Doyle received a text message. They're coming for you. Eddie smirked. Let them try. The Velvet Room exploded into chaos. The following night, Briggs and Julie had been tipped off about trouble, but they weren't prepared for the scale. As they pulled up, they heard gunshots and saw masked men storming the club. Molotov cocktails in hand. Screams echoed as flames licked the walls. Patrons stampeded for the exits. Doyle's men fired back, bullets spraying across the street. Briggs drew his weapon, shouting, "Police, drop it." But no one listened. This wasn't a fight, it was a massacre amid the gunfire. Briggs spotted Doyle. Calm as ever, ducking behind cover with a pistol in his hand. Their eyes met across the chaos for a split second. Briggs swore. Doyle smiled at him, as if to say, "This is my city now." By the time backup arrived, the dogs were scattered to lay dead in the street, one bleeding out on the pavement. The Velvet Room smoldered, its windows shattered, and Doyle gone later in the smoking ruins. Briggs kicked a spent shell casing. Julie joined him, coughing from the smoke. "This isn't just gang violence anymore," she said grimly. "It's war." Briggs stared at the blackened sign of the Velvet Room. He thought about the kid killed in home, about the bodies piling up in warehouses and basements. War, he repeated quietly, and Doyle's winning Manchester looked the same to the outside world. Trams running, shoppers huddling under umbrellas, football chants echoing through pubs. But beneath the surface, the city was shifting. Eddie Doyle's shadow stretched longer with each passing week. The dogs were faltering, and everyone knew it. Local dealers were switching sides. Money was being redirected, and pubs that once paid protection to the dogs now slipped envelopes to Doyle's men. Even the police felt it. Informants who once whispered about the dogs now came begging for protection from Doyle's crew. Briggs could feel the city tilting like a table with one leg sawed too short. If Doyle wasn't stopped soon, Manchester wouldn't belong to anyone but him. In a refurbished office on King Street, Doyle sat in front of a glass desk, the rain tapping softly against the window. Gone were the smoky backrooms and dingy pubs. This was legitimacy, at least on the surface. "Congratulations, Mr. Doyle," said Fiona Kavanagh, sliding papers across the desk. You are now the proud owner of 3 laundrettes, 2 minicab companies, and a logistics firm. Eddie leaned back in his chair, grinning, and every pound that goes through them comes out clean. Fiona smirked. As long as you don't get greedy. Eddie stood, looking out at the gray sprawl of the city. This isn't greed, Fiona, this is destiny. The dogs ran this city like cavemen. I'm building an empire, but empires attracted enemies. And Eddie knew it. In a pub in Route. The remaining dogs licked their wounds. Tony Riley, their leader, had grown more paranoid by the day. His once booming voice was now hoarse. His eyes bloodshot, they say. Doyle's got cops in his pocket. Tony growled. That's how he's always a step ahead. Someone's feeding him. The room went quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing, but afraid to speak. Maybe it wasn't just cops. Maybe one of us. Kieran Lowe sat in the corner, trying not to meet Tony's gaze. He had already spoken to Briggs. He had already broken the code if anyone found out. He was a dead man. Walking, Tony slammed his pint down, foam spilling over the rim. From now on, no phones. No meetings unless I call them. One more leak, and I'll start gutting people myself. The dogs nodded, but their loyalty was cracking like thin ice back at the station. Briggs and Julie pored over reports. Another pub firebombed last night. Julie said nobody hurt this time, but Doyle's sending messages. Briggs tapped the desk. He's not just scaring them. He's cutting off their income streams. No pubs. Number protection money? No money. No soldiers. Julie leaned back. So what's our move? Briggs hesitated. We get inside Doyle's operation, find the weak link. Julie frowned. You think he has one? Briggs lit a cigarette, ignoring the no smoking sign on the wall. Everyone does. Even Doyle. The weak link appeared. A week later, his name was Liam Walsh, a mid-level Doyle associate who ran the logistics firm. He wasn't built for this life. Too soft, too nervous, too fond of coke. Briggs found him in a dingy flat, sweating through his shirt, paranoid someone was watching. They'll kill me if they know I'm talking to you, Liam muttered, eyes darting. They'll kill you anyway, Briggs replied coldly. Men like Doyle don't share power. You're a tool, and when you're worn out, he'll toss you. Liam swallowed hard. What do you want? Information. Briggs said bank accounts, businesses, who's on the payroll. Give me Doyle's empire, and I'll give you a way out. Liam hesitated, then nodded. There's a meeting tomorrow night. Doyle's collecting cash. If you're smart, you'll be there. The meeting took place in an underground car park in Salford. Doyle arrived in a black BMW, flanked by 2 bodyguards. Briefcases exchanged hands, envelopes stuffed with cash. It was the kind of scene Briggs had seen 100 times before, except this time, he was watching from the shadows with a camera in hand. Julie's whisper came through the earpiece. Got the shots. That's enough to build a case. But Briggs wasn't satisfied. He wanted Doyle himself, not just scraps. And as he watched Doyle laugh, shake hands, and climb back into the BMW, something inside him twisted. Doyle looked untouchable, charismatic, fearless, adored by his men for the first time. Briggs wondered, what if we can't stop him? Back in Rusholme, paranoia finally boiled over. Tony Riley gathered the dogs in the basement again. His voice shook with rage. We've lost too much, too many funerals, too many stabbings tonight. We take Doyle down. How? Someone asked. We hit his house. The room went silent. Everyone knew Doyle's reputation. His place was a fortress. Armed men, cameras, dogs. Attacking it was suicide, but Tony's pride wouldn't bend. We go in hard, and this once and for all. Kieran Lowe's stomach churned. He knew it was madness, and worse, he knew Doyle already expected it that night. As the dogs armed themselves, Kieran slipped away to make a call. His voice shook as he whispered into the phone. They're coming for you on the other end. Doyle chuckled. Good lad, now sit back and watch them die. The raid was a bloodbath. Dogs stormed Doyle's estate in the dead of night, but they never made it past the gates. Floodlights flared, automatic rifles cracked, and within minutes, the driveway was littered with bodies. The survivors fled, leaving Tony Riley screaming curses into the night until a bullet silenced him by morning. The Rusholme dogs were finished and Eddie Doyle had crowned himself King News, spread fast papers, declared the fall of the dogs. Though no one dared name Doyle directly on the streets, his reputation became myth. Parents warned their kids to stay away from Doyle's lads. Shopkeepers paid protection before being asked. Rival crews bent the knee or vanished in his office. Doyle raised a glass of whiskey to the future, he said, but outside his empire. Two people weren't celebrating. Briggs stared at the crime scene photos. Bodies sprawled across Doyle's driveway. Julie watched him carefully. "We could have stopped this," she said. Briggs shook his head. "No, we were too late. And now, Manchester belongs to Doyle." He said it with bitterness, but also with something else, something darker, because deep down, part of him respected the man he was supposed to destroy it. Doyle's empire had reached its peak. The dogs were dead. The rivals cowed, and the police were always one step behind. He wore tailored suits now, drove cars that glided down Deansgate like sharks, and held meetings in boardrooms instead of basements. But power, in Manchester or anywhere, was never permanent. Briggs knew that he'd seen it too many times. The higher a man climbed, the easier it was to knock him down if you were willing to fall with him for weeks. Briggs worked. Liam Walsh, Doyle's shaky logistics manager, Coke, had hollowed Liam out, left him desperate, with a mixture of threats and promises. Briggs got him to talk bank accounts, shell companies, names of politicians. Doyle was bribing. It was enough to light a fuse, but the problem wasn't evidence, it was survival. Everyone who crossed Doyle ended up in the canal. Briggs wasn't naive. He knew what would happen if he misstepped. "Once we move on, Doyle, there's no going back," Julie warned. Briggs stared at the city skyline from the station window. No going back was a long time ago, the night of the takedown. Rain lashed the streets. Doyle was holding a meeting at one of his laundrettes, a place that moved more cash in a night than some banks. Briggs and Julie rolled in with armed units, sirens slicing through the night inside. Doyle didn't panic. He stood calmly as his men scattered when Briggs entered, gun raised. Doyle gave him that same grin he had worn outside the Velvet Room months ago. "Took you long enough, Callum," Doyle said. "I was starting to think you liked watching me work." Briggs's jaw clenched for a moment. He thought about pulling the trigger right there, ending Doyle the old-fashioned way, but the cameras were rolling, and Briggs still wore a badge. "You're finished, Doyle," he said, slapping cuffs on him. Doyle leaned in close, whispering in his ear, "Am I, or am I just getting started?" The trial was a circus. Witnesses vanished. Evidence mysteriously disappeared. Jurors received threats in the end. Doyle walked free on a technicality. The newspapers called it a disgrace. The public called it corruption. Briggs called it what it was: defeat. One night, long after the trial, Briggs sat alone in a pub, whiskey in hand. The rain hammered the windows. Neon lights bleeding across the wet pavement outside Manchester went on, same as it always had, but something fundamental had shifted in the corner of the pub's TV. A news anchor reported. Local businessman Edward Doyle announced new investments in city housing today. Briggs didn't need to listen further. He raised his glass. A bitter toast. The dogs were gone. The police had failed, and Eddie Doyle, the man who rose from back alleys and bloodshed, now ruled Manchester in a suit and tie. Briggs took a long swallow. Knowing the truth, no headline would ever print. The city hadn't been saved. The city had been bought. Manchester. 18 months later, the city had changed on the surface. It gleamed. New apartment blocks rose along the canals. Trendy cafes opened and banners proclaimed investing in Manchester's future. The name behind much of that investment was Edward Doyle, now hailed in certain circles as a local entrepreneur, but beneath the polished headlines, Doyle's empire was still what it had always been, built on blood. Inside a boardroom overlooking spinning, Doyle sat at the head of a glass table. Around him were men in suits, once thugs in tracksuits, but now dressed like bankers. Fiona Kavanagh clicked through a presentation on a projector. showing profit charts and land acquisitions, all legitimate, she said smoothly on paper. At least the problem isn't the money, it's the men. They're restless. Some still think like street soldiers. They want the quick score, the easy cash. They don't understand that empire is patience. Eddie drummed his fingers on the table. Then they'll learn, or they'll be replaced. The room went quiet. Everyone knew what replaced meant in Doyle's vocabulary on the other side of the city. Detective Callum Briggs was no longer wearing a badge after Doyle's trial fiasco. He had handed in his papers officially. He retired early, unofficially. He couldn't stand serving in a system where monsters like Doyle walked free now. He worked odd jobs, drank too much, and watched the city slide deeper into Doyle's grip. But he wasn't done. Not yet. Julie Harper had stayed on the force, and sometimes she met Briggs in quiet pubs, passing him scraps of intel. This new guy in Doyle's circle, she said one night, lowering her voice. Mickey Rowan ex-dog. Somehow he's back in the game, and Doyle trusts him. Briggs frowned. No one trusts an ex-dog, not unless they've got a reason. Julie hesitated. Maybe Doyle doesn't know Mickey's playing both sides. Briggs leaned forward. You're saying he's a rat? I'm saying, Julie whispered, if Doyle's empire is going to fall, it won't be through the courts. It'll be from inside. Mickey Rowan had survived the slaughter of the dogs. By crawling into the shadows, he'd lost friends, brothers, and nearly his own life. For months, he stayed low, working construction, pretending the streets were behind him, but revenge was a disease. And Manchester was full of carriers now, dressed in a suit. Mickey poured whiskey for Doyle in the King Street office. You've come far, Mickey, Doyle said, raising the glass from dogs to Doyle. Not bad, Mickey forced a smile. I go where the future is, Doyle laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. And the future is here. Mate, the past is dead, but in Mickey's heart, the past was very much alive. Every time he saw Doyle's grin, he remembered his brothers burned, shot, buried. Every time Doyle spoke of the future, Mickey thought only of vengeance. And now, sitting closer to Doyle than anyone else, he finally had the chance. Briggs felt the old fire return when Julie told him about Mickey. A survivor with a grudge could be the perfect weapon, but it was dangerous too. Dangerous for the police. That's why Briggs didn't tell Julie what he planned next. He tracked Mickey down in a club off Oxford Road, cornering him in the smoking area. You don't know me, Briggs said, exhaling smoke, but I know you, and I know you want Doyle. Dead. Mickey's eyes narrowed. Careful, old man, that kind of talk gets you killed. Briggs leaned closer. I don't care about talk. I care about results. You want to bring him down. I can help. Mickey studied him for a long moment, then finally asked, why? Briggs's eyes were cold. Because Doyle took my city, and I want it back. The deal was struck that night. Briggs would provide intel, strategy, and connections Mickey couldn't reach. Mickey would move from within, slowly rotting Doyle's empire. But empires don't collapse quietly. They explode. For all his talk of legitimacy, Eddie Doyle still trusted violence more than contracts. His boardroom was polished glass and steel, but the men who sat around it weren't accountants. They were killers who had swapped tracksuits for tailored jackets one rainy Tuesday. Doyle convened his lieutenants. Fiona Kavanagh clicked through slides of real estate investments, but Eddie barely listened. He was watching the faces around the table. Profits are up, Fiona said crisply, but there's leakage in the logistics firm. Numbers don't match. Eddie's gold tooth flashed. Leakage means theft, and theft means disrespect. His eyes landed on Liam Walsh, pale and sweating at the far end. Liam stammered, I don't know nothing about. Eddie's hand shot out, grabbing Liam by the tie and yanking him across the table. The other men froze as Doyle hissed into his ear, You think I don't see it? You think I don't smell it? Liam whimpered, his face turning red. Doyle shoved him back into his chair and smoothed his suit. Sort it out, or I will. The meeting continued, but the mood had shifted. Mickey Rowan, sitting 2 seats down, watched silently. Every display of Doyle's paranoia was another crack he could widen. Briggs sat in his dingy flat with files spread across the table. His hands shook as he poured whiskey into a chipped glass. He had no badge, no authority, nothing but rage. Yet Julie's whispers from the force kept him armed with just enough intel to play the game. He replayed his conversation with Mickey in his head. "You want Doyle dead?" I can help. The words tasted bitter now. Briggs knew he had crossed the line. He wasn't a cop anymore. He was a conspirator still. Every time he pictured Doyle's smirk, the weight lifted a little. Mickey moved carefully, too carefully for Doyle not to notice one night. After a late meeting, Doyle caught him in the office corridor. "You're quiet these days, Mickey," Doyle said. Lighting a cigarette, smoke curled between them two. "Quiet," Mickey shrugged. "Just keeping my head down, learning." Doyle studied him for a long time, then smiled. "Good, keep watching, keep learning. Maybe one day this will all be yours." The words cut like glass from Mickey. It wasn't ambition, it was insult. Doyle offering him the empire built on the corpses of his brothers. It only hardened his resolve. Doyle raged in private, but in public he laughed it off. Competitors, he told the press, jealous rivals, trying to smear my name, but behind closed doors. Paranoia spread. Every man looked at the other, wondering who had talked. Liam Walsh trembled harder, and Mickey smiled to himself. But paranoia cuts both ways. That same week, Doyle's bodyguard found Briggs tailing one of his cars. They dragged him into a warehouse, fists flying, boots pounding by the time Doyle arrived. Briggs was bloodied, but conscious, leaning against a chair. Well, Doyle said, crouching in front of him. The great detective Briggs, retired, disgraced, and still sniffing around my affairs. Briggs spat blood onto the floor. "One day, Eddie, one day, they'll bury you too." Doyle grinned. "Maybe, but not today." He stood, gesturing to his men. "Let him go." Briggs blinked in shock. Doyle leaned close, voice almost friendly. "A man like you living in my city, watching me rise. That's punishment enough. Every day you wake up and see me untouchable. You'll suffer more than if I put you in the ground." They dumped Briggs outside in the rain, broken ribs, stabbing his breath, and as he lay there, coughing blood, he swore Doyle would not walk away again. Back in the boardroom, Eddie Doyle raised a glass of whiskey to his men. "To Manchester," he said, "to the future." But in the shadows, Mickey Rowan sharpened his knife, and Callum Briggs stitched his wounds. The empire looked unshakable, but blood had already seeped into the foundations, and Manchester was a city that never forgot its ghosts. Doyle's empire glittered on the surface, but inside, it rotted after the Salford Keys seizure. Eddie no longer trusted anyone completely. His boardroom meetings grew shorter, his temper sharper. He stopped drinking in public, stopped smiling for the cameras. "Even Fiona noticed you're pushing too hard," she told him one evening as they sat in his penthouse. "City lights spread below. If you keep seeing traitors everywhere, you'll end up creating them." Eddie swirled the whiskey in his glass. "I don't see traitors everywhere, just where they are." Fiona leaned forward, her tone cold. "Then make sure you're right, because if you start killing the wrong men, you'll tear this empire apart with your own hands." For the first time, Doyle didn't answer her. He just stared out at the city like a king who knew his crown was slipping. Meanwhile, Mickey Rowan had become Doyle's shadow. The closer he stood, the more dangerous it became. He was Doyle's driver, his bodyguard, his confidant. But every handshake, every nod, every smile hid a blade behind it. Late one night, Mickey met Briggs in a derelict warehouse near home. The ex-detective looked like hell-bandaged ribs, purple bruises fading yellow, but his eyes still burned. "You're lucky Doyle let you live," Mickey muttered. Briggs lit a cigarette, wincing with the motion. "No, Doyle's unlucky. He should have killed me." Mickey smirked. "Despite himself, still got fight in you, old man." Briggs blew smoke. "I've got enough fight left to see him fall. That's all I need." Mickey leaned against a pillar, lowering his voice. "Then listen, next week, Doyle's hosting a sit-down in Ancoats. Italians, Albanians, couple of old Manchester lads. He wants to show he's still in charge." Briggs raised an eyebrow. "And you want me to do what?" March in with a badge I don't have, and arrest him. No, Mickey said. I want you to make sure the world's watching when I cut his legs out from under him. Briggs frowned, meaning I'm done waiting. Doyle dies at that sit-down, but Doyle hadn't built his empire by being blind that same week. He summoned Fiona and 2 of his lieutenants into a private meeting. The air was tense. Heavy with suspicion there's a rat, Doyle said flatly. No question the cops don't move on me without inside help. Liam Walsh paled instantly. Fiona stayed calm. And you think it's one of us? Doyle's eyes swept the room, finally landing on Liam. I don't think I know, Liam stammered. Boss, I swear. A gunshot cut him off. Blood sprayed across the boardroom glass. Liam slumped sideways, dead before he hit the floor. Doyle holstered his pistol. Turning back to Fiona. Now we're safe. But Fiona's eyes flicked to Mickey, who stood in the corner like a statue for a fraction of a second. She thought she saw something in his face. Not fear, not shock. Satisfaction, and it chilled her to the bone. The night of the sit-down arrived an old warehouse in Ant, dressed up with velvet curtains and chandeliers, like some grotesque parody of luxury cars pulled up. Men in sharp suits filed in, kisses on cheeks, nods of respect. Doyle entered last. Mickey at his side. He shook hands, poured wine, laughed too loud, but his eyes never stopped scanning. He was hunting shadows from a rooftop across the street. Briggs watched through binoculars, his breath ragged. Julie had slipped him police comes if. Violence erupted. Sirens would be there within minutes inside. Mickey stood close as Doyle raised his glass to new partnerships. Doyle said to Manchester. The men echoed the toast, glasses clinking, and Mickey's hand slid inside his jacket. His heart thundered. Every brother, every corpse, every betrayal screamed in his blood. All he had to do was draw the pistol, pull the trigger, and Doyle's empire would crumble in one bloody instant. But before he could, Doyle turned suddenly, locking eyes with him. Funny thing about rats, Doyle said, his grin razor sharp. They always think they're the hunters until they're caught. Mickey froze. The room went silent. Dan Briggs, watching from the rooftop, whispered to himself, Christ, he knows. The silence inside the warehouse was suffocating. Every pair of eyes turned toward Mickey Rowan, his hand half inside his jacket, fingers grazing the pistol grip. Doyle's grin widened. Go on then, lad, show our friends what loyalty looks like. The Italians shifted uneasily. The Albanians muttered in their own tongue. Fiona, standing just behind Doyle, didn't blink. Mickey pulled his hand back slowly. Empty, just reaching for a smoke, he said. Forcing a smirk, he held up a battered cigarette packet. Can't toast the future without a drag, eh? A ripple of nervous laughter spread around the table. The tension cracked, but didn't vanish. Doyle's eyes stayed locked on Mickey. He'd seen the hesitation, he'd smelled the intent, and now he knew. After the meeting wound down, deals sealed in half-truths and wine, Doyle dismissed the others. Only Fiona and Mickey remained. Doyle poured 3 glasses of whiskey, sliding one toward Mickey. To trust, he said. Mickey raised it, hand steady though, his pulse hammered. To trust. They drank. Fiona stayed silent, watching them both like a chess match, already in motion. When Mickey left the warehouse that night, the cold air hit him like a slap. He knew 2 things. Doyle suspected him, and Doyle never let suspicion linger. It was kill or be killed, now across town. Briggs sat slumped in his flat, a heating pad strapped to his ribs, listening to the rain drum the window. His phone buzzed in. Unknown number, he answered. Mickey. The voice said. Briggs straightened. Well, nearly did it tonight, Mickey said, voice low, but he clocked me. He knows I'm off. It's just a matter of time. Briggs clenched his jaw. Then don't wait. You have to move first. Mickey laughed bitterly. Easy for you to say. Sitting safe in your flat. Briggs slammed his fist against the table, pain shooting through his ribs. Safe? He's already had me half killed once. I'm in this as deep as you are. If Doyle survives, he'll finish us both. There was a long pause. Then Mickey said, next move's mine, but if I go down, you finish it. Promise me. Briggs whispered. You have my word. The line went dead 2 nights later. Doyle called Fiona to his penthouse. Rain slicked the glass walls as Manchester glowed below. I should have shot him at the table, Doyle muttered. Pacing like a caged animal would have saved us trouble. Fiona crossed her arms and started a war with half the city's outfits watching. No, Eddie, you needed calm, but now. She met his eyes. Now you need certainty. Either Mickey's with you or he's dead. Doyle exhaled through his nose. A bull before the charge, then set it up quiet. No mistakes, but Fiona hesitated for weeks. She'd been watching Doyle unravel his paranoia, his brutality, his obsession with control. Mickey's defiance had sparked something dangerous, yes, but it had also exposed Doyle's weakness. And Fiona Kavanaugh had never planned to die in another man's empire. Mickey didn't wait for Doyle's trap the very next evening. He parked Doyle's black Mercedes outside the King Street offices. As Doyle stepped in, adjusting his cufflinks, Mickey caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. Big day, tomorrow? Mickey asked. Casually. Doyle smirked. Every day's a big day when you're me. Mickey forced a laugh, but his hand rested lightly on the pistol tucked under his seat. One move, one pull of the trigger, he could end it right there. Blood soaking the leather seats. But then Fiona stepped out of the building, slipping into the back beside Doyle. Drive, she said coolly. Mickey gripped the wheel. Knuckles' white fate had spared Doyle for another night, but only just back in home. Briggs stared at a map of Manchester spread across his table, cigarette ash spilling onto ice, muttered to himself, come on, Rowan, don't lose your nerve now, because Briggs knew the truth. If Mickey failed, Doyle would come hunting, and when Doyle hunted, the whole city bled. The storm was building in Manchester. Storms always ended in blood. The days after the Ancoats sit-down were thick with unease. Doyle's empire still functioned. Money laundered, drugs moved, properties signed over bait. Something had shifted. His men whispered behind closed doors. Fiona caught sidelong glances during meetings. And Eddie Doyle, he slept less and drank more. Every shadow was a threat. Every loyal smile looked like a mask. On a gray Friday morning, Doyle summoned Mickey to his penthouse. The city stretched beneath them in mist and drizzled. Doyle poured 2 coffees. No whiskey this time. You've done well, Mickey, Doyle said, voice calm but eyes sharp. I trust you, but I need to know, Ken. I rely on you like I rely on Fiona. Mickey forced himself to meet Doyle's gaze. Course you can. Boss, you saved me when I had nothing. I'd bleed for you. Doyle leaned back, studying him in silence. The seconds dragged. Finally, he smiled faintly. Good lad. Then bleed. You shall. Mickey's stomach turned. He left the penthouse with a grin plastered on his face. But inside, he knew Doyle was circling him like a wolf that night. Fiona found Mickey outside the offices, smoking. She glanced around, then stepped close. You've got about 3 days left, she said quietly. Mickey frowned. What are you talking about? Eddie's testing you. He already thinks you're a rat. He's just deciding whether to kill you in public or private. Mickey's jaw tightened. And what's your angle? Fiona? Warning me out of kindness? Her lips curved into something between a smile and a sneer. Kindness doesn't exist in this game, but Doyle's slipping. He's paranoid. Reckless. That makes him dangerous to you, to me, to the whole empire. If he falls, someone has to step in. Someone who understands business. Not just blood. You mean you? Mickey muttered. Fiona's eyes glittered. I mean us. You've got his trust enough to get close. I've got the brains to hold this together. After he's gone, work with me. And we both live. Keep playing alone. And you'll die in a ditch by Sunday. Mickey didn't answer, but when she walked away, his cigarette burned down to the filter without him noticing. Briggs was healing slower than he wanted. His ribs still ached. His head still throbbed, but rage was a better medicine than rest. Julie Harper slipped into his flat after midnight, dropping a folder on the table. You didn't get this from me. Inside were surveillance photos. Doyle at the sit-down. Doyle's cars. Doyle's penthouse security patterns. Briggs smirked. You're still playing both sides. Julie shrugged. Maybe I just don't like watching Doyle by the city, while good people rot. She studied him, eyes softening. Callum, don't let this eat you alive. He's not worth it. Briggs lit a cigarette, ignoring the pain in his ribs. Everything he's taken from me, from this city. He's worth it. The breaking point came sooner than expected Saturday night. Doyle's men gathered in the boardroom, whiskey flowing. Laughter forced. Doyle sat at the head, his gold tooth flashing midway through the meeting. He slammed his glass down. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Enough pretending. He snarled, his eyes locked on Mickey's stand-up. Mickey rose slowly, heart pounding. Tell them, Doyle said. Tell them how loyal you are. Tell them why I should keep you alive. The room went silent. Even Fiona's face was unreadable. Mickey's hand twitched toward his jacket. Every instinct screamed to draw, to fire, to end it. But Doyle was already smiling. That wolf's smile, you see. Lads, Doyle said, spreading his arms. A rat always thinks he's clever, but me. I always know. Mickey's fingers closed around the pistol. Grip. Fiona's chair scraped back, and Briggs, crouched in a car across the street with binoculars, whispered, do it. Rowan, do it now. The room was seconds from erupting. The boardroom smelled of whiskey, sweat, and fear. Rain tapped the glass walls. The city lights beyond blurred in streaks of neon. Mickey, Rowan stood stiff, hand buried inside his jacket, fingers brushing the cold steel of the pistol. Doyle lounged at the head of the table, grin stretched wide, gold tooth catching the light. You've been quiet too long, Mickey, Doyle said softly. That's how rats behave. They scurry in silence, eh? Low murmur spread among the lieutenants. Some shifted nervously. Others reached for knives tucked beneath suits. Fiona remained still, eyes darting between Doyle and Mickey. Calculating, always calculating. Mickey's pulse thundered in his ears. This was it. No more waiting. No more planning either. Doyle died tonight. Tore. Mickey did. His pistol cleared. The room erupted. Doyle flipped the table with surprising speed, the heavy oak crashing onto its side as bullets cracked through the glass walls. Two of his lieutenants drew and fired wildly. One slug caught another in the neck. Blood sprayed across the frosted windows. McKee dove behind a chair, returning fire. One shot took a man in the gut. He crumpled, screaming. Another grazed Doyle's arm, tearing his suit but missing bone. Bastard, Doyle roared, vaulting from behind the table with his own pistol. The two men circled, exchanging shots in the chaos, each bullet shattering glass, wood flesh up. Briggs heard the muffled cracks of gunfire from his car. He sat bolt upright, binoculars dropping onto the passenger seat. Jesus Christ, he muttered, fumbling for the revolver he hadn't fired in years. Pain lanced through his ribs as he pushed the door open, but he didn't care. This was the moment he'd been crawling toward for months. Back in the boardroom, bodies littered the floor. Fiona had slipped behind a column, her pistol drawn but unused. She wasn't aiming at Doyle, nor Mickey. She was waiting. Mickey fired his last round, slamming into Doyle's shoulder. The gangster staggered, roaring in fury, but refused to fall. Blood ran down his suit. Yet he raised his pistol and fired back. The bullet grazed Mickey's skull, tearing flesh, blinding him with hot blood. He crashed to his knees, vision swimming. Doyle loomed over him, chest heaving, gun aimed square at Mickey's face. You thought you could take me? Doyle snarled. I built this city on blood. You're just another corpse in the mortar. Mickey spat blood. Not tonight. Before Doyle could pull the trigger, Fiona's shot rang out. Bang. Doyle jerked, eyes wide. As the bullet punched through his side, he stumbled, turning toward Fiona. Betrayal etched across his face. You, he gasped. She fired again this time. The bullet hit his chest. Doyle collapsed backward, the gun tumbling from his grip, his gold tooth catching the light one final time before he hit the floor. The King of Manchester lay dead. The silence after the gunfire was deafening. Smoke hung in the air, broken only by the groans of the dying Mickey. stared at Fiona through blood-soaked eyes. Why? Fiona stepped forward, pistol still smoking. Her face was calm, her voice steady because he forgot what power is. He thought fear was enough, but fear fades money. Business, structured those last, with Doyle gone. The city needs order, and I intend to provide it, Mickey coughed, swaying on his knees and me. Fiona knelt, pressing a hand to his cheek. Almost tender. You've served your purpose, Mickey, but you won't survive this war. Her gun pressed against his temple before she could fire. The boardroom doors burst open. Briggs staggered in, revolver raised. Drop it, Fiona. He barked. His voice was hoarse but steady for the first time. Fiona looked rattled. Briggs, she said coolly, you're out of your depth. Put the gun down before you drown with the rest of us. Briggs aimed straight at her head. Jaw tight. No. It ends tonight. No more empires, no more kings, no more queens. Mickey collapsed sideways, blood pooling beneath him. Fiona's finger twitched on the trigger. The boardroom became a frozen tableau. Doyle's corpse cooling on the floor. Mickey half dead, Fiona steady as a blade, and Briggs standing on broken ribs, trying to hold back the tide of Manchester's underworld with nothing but rage and a revolver. The city held its breath. The boardroom was a graveyard of smoke and silence. Doyle's body sprawled across the carpet, blood soaking into the fibers, gold tooth glinting faintly in the light. Mickey bled out on his side. Half-conscious, Fiona stood tall, pistol steady, eyes locked on Briggs. Drop it, she said evenly. Briggs coughed, ribs screaming, but he kept the revolver aimed. Not a chance. You killed Doyle, and now you want his throne. I've seen this play before. Fiona tilted her head, almost amused. And what will you do, detective? Shoot me? Walk into the street with Doyle dead and his empire leaderless? The vultures will descend within hours. You'll have chaos, blood in every district. Doyle may have been a monster, but he was a monster the city understood. Briggs's finger tightened on the trigger. Better chaos than letting you crown yourself queen. The air was electric. Every second stretched like wire about to snap. Then Mickey groaned, dragging himself up on one elbow. His face was slick with blood, his voice a rasp. Shoot her, Briggs, before she finishes it. Fiona's eyes flicked down at him, then back to Briggs. See? He's finished. A relic of Doyle's paranoia. I, on the other hand, can hold this together. You want Doyle's empire dismantled? Fine, let me do it, piece by piece, without bathing Manchester in fire. Briggs's hands shook. His mind screamed for justice, for vengeance, but his body was broken, his aim unsteady. Fiona saw the weakness slowly. Deliberately, she lowered her pistol. Walk away. Briggs, take your crusade elsewhere. Doyle's dead. That's what you wanted. If you pull that trigger, you'll just create another martyr. Let me clean this up for a moment. Briggs almost believed her. Almost. Then Mickey coughed blood and whispered, she'll kill me the second you leave. And in Fiona's eyes, Briggs saw it, the cold, sharp truth. The revolver barked one shot. Fiona jerked backward, a crimson bloom spreading across her blouse. She collapsed beside Doyle's body, eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time, she had miscalculated. Briggs staggered forward, smoke curling from his gun. Not this time. No more monsters. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. Mickey slumped against the wall, laughing weakly through the blood. About time. Someone pulled that trigger. Briggs dropped beside him, checking his pulse. You need a hospital now. Mickey shook his head faintly. Don't bother. I've been living on borrowed time since the dogs burned. Just promise me Doyle's empire dies with him. Briggs gripped his shoulder, voice hoarse. I swear it. Mickey smiled faintly, eyes closing. Good enough. His hand slipped, limp. Briggs stared at him for a long moment before standing on trembling legs. Doyle, Fiona, McKeel, gone in one night. The city's three sharpest blades snapped at once. Manchester had no king, now no queen, only ashes. Briggs stumbled from the building into the wet night. Sirens wailed in the distance. Julie must have called them in after the gunfire started. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. The taste of blood still in his mouth, the city skyline glittered against the rain, towers rising over a river of shadows for the first time in years. Doyle's face wasn't there no more, grinning gold tooth on the front page. No more empire to mock the law, but Briggs knew better than to celebrate, because Manchester didn't stay empty for long. Empires crumble. Power shifts, and the streets were already whispering of who might rise next. Briggs pulled his coat tighter, exhaling smoke into the night. Let them come, he muttered, because if Manchester taught him anything, it was this. Kings die, but the city always survives. The rain didn't wash the blood away by dawn. Word had spread across every pub, betting shop, and back alley in Manchester. Doyle was dead, Fiona. To Mickey, gone the empire, headless to most. It was unthinkable. Doyle had been the city's shadow government for nearly 2 decades. His death left not just a gap in power, it left a challenge, and in Manchester, challenges never go unanswered. In a smoky pub in 3 young men huddled in a corner booth. They weren't old-school gangsters in sharp suits. They were wolves in hoodies and trainers, faces hard, eyes bright with greed. "Doyle's done," said Callum Price, tapping ash into his pint. "Feds say it was a turf war gone bad. Coppers won't admit it. But the bastard's finished, which means all his rackets are up for grabs." His brother, Jamie, grinned, gold chain glinting under the dim lights. "Protection money, coke, guns, Christ. Even the bloody bookmakers, we take just half of that, and we're set for life." The third man, lanky and quiet, leaned forward. His name was Darius Khan, sharper-minded, unlike the Price Bros. He wasn't in it for chaos, he was in it for the throne. Slowed down, he warned. Doyle had more than businesses, he had systems, contacts in the docks, judges in his pocket, dirty cops everywhere. That doesn't vanish overnight. If we move too fast, we'll get crushed before we've begun, Jamie sneered. "So what, you want us to sit on our hands while someone else takes it?" Darius sipped his whiskey. "Calm, no, I'm saying we move differently, not as scavengers, as successors." Callum frowned. "You mean replace Doyle?" Darius smiled faintly. "Why not? Every empire needs a new king across the city." Briggs sat in his office, staring at the murder reports. Doyle's name scrawled across every headline, but none of the papers mentioned him. The brass wanted it quiet. Gangland violence, no police involvement. He should have been relieved. Doyle was gone. Fiona to Mickey had died asking for piso. Why did Briggs feel sick? Julie knocked on the door, carrying a stack of files. "Sir, you should see this." Briggs glanced up. "What now?" She laid out photos. The Price Bros, Darius Khan, a half-dozen other young faces. "They're already moving. Doyle's people are either dead, scattered, or hiding. These lads are recruiting, claiming they're Doyle's successors." Briggs swore under his breath. "Bloody kids. They don't know what they're playing with." Julie gave him a grim look. "Don't underestimate them. They're not Doyle, but they don't need to be. They're faster, meaner, less predictable if we don't stop them now. Manchester's about to burn all over again." Briggs rubbed his temples. He was tired, too tired, for another war. But Manchester didn't care about his exhaustion. The city was already shifting under his feet by the weekend. The Wolves had made their first move. A Doyle owned betting shop in Salford was firebombed at midnight, glass raining across the pavement. A Doyle loyalist was found in a canal, throat cut, ear to ear. A rival crew in Holme was gunned down outside a kebab shop. 5 bodies in under 10 seconds. Message was clear. The old guard was finished. The new blood wasn't asking permission in the streets. Loved it. Dealers, who once feared Doyle's tax, now cheered at their freedom. Young recruits flooded to the Wolves, hungry for cash, power, and chaos for the first time in decades. Manchester didn't have a king, it had a pack. Briggs watched the news footage of the Salford firebombing, cigarette burning low in his hand. His reflection stared back at him in the darkened window. Hollow eyes, lined face. Had killed Doyle, killed Fiona, watched Mickey bleed out, and yet, somehow, the city looked worse now than before. Julie's voice broke the silence. "What do we do, sir?" Briggs didn't answer right away. He exhaled smoke, watching the city lights flicker like embers finally. He muttered, "We go hunting." The alley stank of petrol and burnt rubber. Briggs crouched near the wreckage of a black BMW, its shell still hissing in the drizzle inside. 3 young men lay charred beyond recognition. The fire crew zipped them into bags while uniforms kept gawkers at bay. Lee stepped up beside him, shaking her head. Price Brothers rivals thought they could muscle in on Ardwick. Didn't even last a week. Briggs grunted. "Amateurs." Doyle would have folded them into his crew. "These new lot just torch anything that moves." Julie gave him a sharp look. "That's what makes them dangerous. They don't care about alliances. Only control. If we don't shut this down fast, we'll have gangs at war on every street." Briggs lit a cigarette, ignoring the rain. "Then we put them down before they learn Doyle's playbook." Across town, in a dim apartment above a shuttered kebab shop, Darius Khan studied a map spread across the table. Pins marked Doyle's old rackets, betting shops, pubs, warehouses near the canal around him. The Price brothers bickered over territory like schoolboys. "Ardwick's ours now," Jamie said, slamming a fist on the table. "We torched them clean. Next, we take Long Sight," Callum snorted. "We can't just keep bombing every prick who looks at us sideways. We'll have the feds swarming before we've made a penny," Jamie sneered. "And what? You want to sit on our arses? Doyle's leftovers are free for the taking." Darius leaned back, letting the argument run before he cut in. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Jamie's right, that we expand. Callum's right, that we need more than fire to do it. Doyle didn't rule by fear alone. He had order systems. Even the cops looked the other way, because he kept things stable." Jamie scoffed. "We're not Doyle." Darius smiled faintly. "Exactly, will be worse." The brothers fell silent at that. Darius tapped the map. "We don't just want Doyle's scraps. We build something new, quicker, smarter. We take the streets, but we take the city above them. 2 politicians, businessmen, coppers, the ones Doyle left behind." Callum frowned. "And how do you plan on doing that?" Darius's eyes gleamed the same way Doyle did, one body at a time. That night, a Doyle loyalist named Eddie O'Rourke was dragged from his flat in home. Neighbors heard the struggle, the screaming. By morning, his corpse dangled beneath a railway bridge, a cardboard sign tied to his chest. "No trins, only WLVS." The message spread faster than the firebombs ever could. Fear turned into reverence. Young men whispered that Doyle's shadow was gone for good, and the wolves were already writing new laws. And Blood Briggs read the report at his desk, jaw tightening. "They're making a bloody spectacle of it." Julie folded her arms. "It's working. Kids on the estate are treating them like rock stars. Half of Doyle's old runners have already switched sides." Briggs ground out his cigarette. "Then we cut the head off the snake before it grows teeth." The wolves weren't hiding. They wanted to be seen by the weekend. Darius held a gathering at an underground club near the canal. Music pounded, lights flashed, and crates of Doyle's stolen cocaine were stacked in plain sight. Briggs and Julie watched from an unmarked car parked across the street. "Surveillance shows at least 20 inside," Julie said, adjusting her earpiece to many guns for a raid. Briggs's eyes stayed locked on the entrance. "I'm not here for a raid. I'm here for him," as if on cue. Darius stepped out onto the balcony above the club, drink in hand, Price brothers at his side. He raised his glass to the roaring crowd below. Briggs muttered under his breath, "There's our wolf." Julie shot him a warning look. "Sir, don't. Not tonight. We need backup. Warrants." But Briggs had already opened the door, rain slicking his coat as he stepped into the street. 4 years. He'd hunted Doyle in the shadows. This time, he wasn't waiting. This time, he was going to walk straight into the wolves' den. Manchester was restless. The air itself seemed to buzz with rumors, fear, and greed. Doyle's body was barely cold in the ground, and already the city was dividing itself between those clinging to the memory of his empire and those desperate to carve it up. Detective Briggs sat at his desk in the half-lit CID office, cigarette smoke curling into the ceiling tiles. His partner Julie brought him black coffee, and dropped a file in front of him. "Another one," she said flatly. Briggs opened the folder. Photos. A man hanging beneath a railway bridge, eyes wide, skin pale, chest scarred by the crude sign tied with twine. "No kings, only WLVES." Briggs exhaled slowly. "Or?" Julie nodded. "One of Doyle's loyalists refused to pay tax to the wolves. They made an example." Briggs shut the file. "They're branding the city already." "They're kids," Julie said, shaking her head. "Half of them still live with their mothers, but they've got numbers, and they're not afraid to spill blood." Briggs ground his cigarette out in the ashtray. "Numbers don't make you untouchable. Every wolf has a throat." The wolves at play in a shuttered warehouse near the canals. Darius Khan sat at the head of a makeshift table. Around him, the Price brothers paced, restless, hungry. "Long sights. Hours now," Jamie boasted. "Pubs are paying up. Even Doyle's old boys are bending." Callum leaned against a crate. "We're growing fast, but we're burning hotter than we can feed. Every firebomb, every stabbing its attention. Coppers are sniffing. We'll get crushed if we don't slow it down." Darius drummed his fingers on the table. His eyes were sharp, calculating. Unlike the Prices, he didn't get high on chaos. He was building something. "Chaos is a tool," Darius said softly. "We keep burning just long enough to erase Doyle's shadow. After that, we build not just gangs on estates, a structure, a machine." Jamie frowned. "What kind of machine?" Darius leaned forward, voice steady. Doyle was feared, but Doyle was also respected. He had rules. Systems. People feared the man but trusted the order. "We don't want to be just wolves tearing scraps. We want to be kings. And kings don't beg for respect, they take it." The brothers exchanged a glance. Even they could feel it. Darius wasn't Doyle. He wasn't Fiona. He wasn't Mickey. He was colder, hungrier. He didn't want scraps. He wanted the whole city. The club, though. Wolves made their presence loudest in a club off the canal. A gaudy neon den where music throbbed and crates of cocaine moved under strobe lights. Briggs watched from across the street in an unmarked car. Julie's voice was tight. "At least 20 inside, all armed. You go in there alone. You'll come out in a body bag." Briggs's jaw tightened. Doyle built walls. He wanted to be untouchable. Darius wants to be seen. That's his mistake. Julie grabbed his arm. "Sir, listen to me. You go in there without backup. You'll light the fuse on a war. We need time. Warrants." But Briggs had already stepped into the rain, coat collar up, hand resting on the revolver, under his jacket inside the club. Bass rattled the walls. The Price brothers laughed at the bar, drinks in hand, while Darius stood on a balcony overlooking the dance floor, glass of whiskey in his grip, scanning the crowd like a general watching soldiers. When Briggs pushed through the door, the room shifted. Conversations died. Music seemed to soften. Every set of eyes turned. A cop in their den. Briggs ignored them, walking with slow, steady steps, until he stood beneath the balcony. He looked up, met Darius's gaze for a heartbeat. The whole club froze in silence. Then Darius smiled. Not Doyle's flashy grin, not Fiona's sly smirk, just a cold, thin smile that said, "I know exactly who you are, and I'm not afraid to talk." Minutes later, Briggs sat across from Darius in a private room upstairs. The Prices flanking their new leader. "You've got nerve," Jamie sneered, "walking in here like you own the place." Briggs didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on Darius. "You're writing checks with blood," Briggs said evenly, "and the city's about to call them in." Darius leaned back, unbothered. "Doyle's dead, Fiona's dead, Mickey's dead, and yet here I am. The city's not calling in anything. It's calling out for someone new." Briggs lit a cigarette, smoke drifting lazily. "You think you're Doyle's heir, but Doyle had order. You've got chaos. Chaos burns out." Darius smiled faintly. "You're old. Detective, you think the world still wants order, but these streets, they want fire, fear, a name they can whisper in the dark. That's what I give them. That's why they'll follow me." Briggs exhaled smoke. "And when you fall, they'll follow the next wolf. That's all you are. Son, meat for the machine." For the first time, Darius's smile slipped, just slightly. The Prices tensed, ready to leap, but Darius held up a hand to walk out. "Detective, he said softly. Walk out while you still can. This city isn't yours anymore. Briggs leaned forward, voice low, almost a growl. It was never mine, but it won't be yours either. He stubbed his cigarette out on the table and stood, leaving silence in his wake. The retaliation 2 nights later. Briggs's unmarked car was torched outside his flat, his windows smashed, his front door tagged in red spray paint. Wolves hunt cops, Pia Julie begged him. To accept protection, Briggs refused. They want me rattled, he said, loading his revolver. I won't give them that instead. He began hitting Doyle's old contacts, the bookies, the warehouse owners, the bench solicitors, one by one. He cornered them, forcing names out. Dismantling the wolves' growing infrastructure, the Prices retaliated with brutality, firebombs, shootings, a pub in Ancoats sprayed with bullets, Doyle's old men, the few still loyal, slaughtered in alleys. And, through it all, Darius moved like smoke, never directly touching the violence, always 3 steps away, letting the Prices bloody their hands while he stitched together Doyle's old systems in the background. The shift by winter. The city was divided. North Manchester whispered the wolves' name with fear and awe. In Moss sighed in home. Their boys handed out food parcels with one hand and pulled triggers with the other. Briggs and Julie were drowning in bodies. The brass tied their hands, worried that pushing too hard would spark riots. But Briggs knew the truth. Riots were already coming. Darius wasn't just building a gang, he was building a kingdom, one more ruthless than Doyle's. One that didn't just rule with fear, but thrived on spectacle. Land for every loyalist Doyle left behind. There were 10 young men ready to follow Darius into fire. The decision late one night. Julie confronted Briggs. You can't keep this up. She said, they're targeting you. The department's tying our hands if we don't get out ahead of this. We'll both end up in the ground. Briggs's face was gaunt, eyes shadowed. I didn't kill Doyle just to hand this city to his bastard heirs. If it takes my last breath, I'll stop them. Julie's eyes softened. Then we do it smart. We can't fight fire with fire. We need to turn them against each other. The Prices are muscle, not brains. Darius can't hold them forever. Briggs looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, he almost smiled. Divide the wolves. Exactly, Julie said. Make them tear themselves apart before they tear the city apart. Darius Khan knew ambition could kill as easily as bullets. Doyle had fallen because he tried to be both king and god. Fiona had fallen because she trusted her cleverness more than her instincts. Mickey had fallen because loyalty blinded him. The lesson was clear. Kings weren't killed by enemies, they were killed by friends, which meant the Price brothers were his greatest danger. Jamie and Callum had been useful at first, blunt instruments to carve Doyle's empire apart. Their brutality sent Doyle's old loyalists scattering like rats, but now they were becoming a liability. Jamie in particular. The Price brothers wanted spectacle, torched cars, bodies hanging under bridges, messages sprayed in blood. Darius wanted infrastructure. He wanted the docks, the councilmen, the money laundering networks. He wanted silence and power, and Jamie Price didn't understand silence. Why are we waiting? Jamie snapped one night in their Ancoats hideout. Doyle's boys are finished. The city's wide open. Let's take the rest now. Longside us, Ardwick burn the lot of it and crown ourselves kings. Callum shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't as reckless as his brother, but he rarely opposed him. He's not wrong, Darius. Every day we wait, someone else gets ideas better. We put the boot down hard. Darius leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. His calm voice cut through their heat. And what then? We torch the city until nothing's left to rule. We're not scavengers, we're architects. Doyle's empire lasted 20 years because he built more than fear. If we want to rule, we build something permanent. Jamie sneered. Permanent? You sound like a politician. We're gangsters. Darius's eyes flashed, cold steel beneath his calm tone. No, Jamie. You're a gangster. I'm something else. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Callum tried to smooth it over. We just don't want to look weak. Darius smiled thinly. Trust me, weakness isn't in our blood but inside. He was already making plans. Jamie's impatience was a cancer, and cancers needed cutting. Briggs's trap detective Briggs was exhausted. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. His body ached. His lungs burned from cigarettes, and the city felt heavier than ever. But he could see something Darius couldn't. The cracks in the wolves. Julie brought the files. To his desk, surveillance photos, snippets of conversations Jamie Price doesn't like playing. Second fiddle, she said. He's bragging in pubs that he's the real boss. Callum tries to rein him in, but he's slipping. Briggs's tired eyes studied the photos, so Darius is holding them by the leash, and Jamie's trying to bite it off. Julie nodded. If we play this right, we don't need to take them down. They'll take each other out. Briggs leaned back, rubbing his temples. Divide the wolves. He began planting seeds. Anonymous tips to Jamie's ear. Rumors that Darius was skimming profits, that he was already meeting with Doyle's old lawyers to cut the prices out. Subtle whispers in the right pubs. Old contacts leaning on the right lads. Jamie started to beat. Warning, it came to a head on a rainy Tuesday night. Darius was walking out of a warehouse near the canal, flanked by his men, when a shot rang out. The bullet cracked past his head and buried itself in the brick. Darius didn't flinch. He ducked. Drew and his men scattered for cover. The shooter was gone by the time they searched a message. Not a murder. Later that night, Callum confronted Jamie in a smoky pub. What the hell were you thinking, shooting at Darius? Jamie smirked over his pint, just reminding him he's not untouchable. Callum lowered his voice. You'll get us both killed. Darius isn't Doyle. He won't forgive. Jamie leaned in close. Good. Maybe it's time someone else took the crown, and why not us? Callum didn't answer, but his silence was enough. Briggs closes, and Briggs watched it unfold like a chess game. Every whisper spread. Every glare in the wolves' camp grew sharper, but the brass didn't see it that way. A briefing. The superintendent barked. You're losing control. Briggs, the wolves are running wild. We need arrests, convictions, something the papers can print. Briggs bit back his anger. You put them in cells. They'll be out in a year. You cut them open from the inside. They're gone for good. The superintendent slammed the table. Then make it quick. The Home Office is breathing down my neck after the meeting. Julie found Briggs outside, smoking in the drizzle. You all right? She asked. Briggs exhaled. Smoke. They don't get it. Doyle was a king. You kill a king, you end the kingdom. The wolves aren't a kingdom. They're a pack. You don't cage a pack, you make them eat each other. Julie smiled grimly. Then let's make them hungry. The fracture of the wolves were making money hand over fist. Drugs through the clubs, protection money from pubs, stolen cars moving through the docks. But beneath the shine, tension was boiling at a sit-down in their hideout. Jamie finally snapped. You think you're clever, Darius? He spat. But without us, you're nothing. We did the dirty work. We put Doyle's boys in the ground, and you sit back and count the money. Darius's gaze was cold. That's leadership. Someone has to think beyond the next pint of blood. Jamie slammed his fist on the table. No, that's weakness, and I'm not following weakness. The room went silent. Callum tried to calm him. But Jamie was already pulling a knife. The men around the table tensed, hands hovering near guns. Darius didn't move. His eyes never left Jamie's. Calm, patient, almost amused. Do it, Darius said softly. But remember, if you cut me, you don't just bleed me, you bleed every pound, every gun, every connection I've built. You think you can run this city with a blade and a temper? Try it. You'll be dead inside a week. Jamie's hand shook. His pride screamed for blood. But something in Darius's calm broke him with a growl. He slammed the knife back into the table and stormed out. Darius's smile returned, thin, dangerous. The wolves follow strength, he murmured, and strength isn't rage, it's patience. Briggs watches the sparks that night. Briggs sat in his flat, a bottle of whiskey untouched beside him, listening to the city outside. Sirens wailed in the distance somewhere. Laughter drifted from a pub. Julie rang his phone there breaking. She said, Jamie's about to do something stupid. We just need to push harder. Briggs closed his eyes. He could almost feel Doyle's ghost laughing in the shadows. Push, he said hoarsely, but not too hard. Let the wolves do the killing for us. The night air in Ancoats stank of petrol and rain. Jamie Price walked fast, his fists clenching and unclenching. Fury, burning hotter with every step. Darius had humiliated him in front of the lads. No less, he could feel their eyes still on him, judging, whispering it wasn't supposed to be like this. Jamie had been the hammer, the one who crushed Doyle's loyalists, the one who left corpses on street corners as warnings. Without him, there was no wolves, and yet, somehow, Darius was the one sitting on the throne. Jamie wanted more than scraps. He wanted the crown, so he started making calls, quiet ones. Old Doyle men still hiding, waiting for the right chance. Small crews in Salford, who'd been squeezed too hard. Even some wolves' foot soldiers who'd grown tired of Darius's quiet, calculating style. Jamie offered them something simple. Fire. No more waiting. No more whispering. We take this city now. None of this chess game bollocks. If you're with me, you'll eat. If you're not, well, you'll bleed. And to his surprise, men followed Callum's dilemma. Callum Price saw the storm coming before it hit. He loved his brother, but Jamie was reckless, blinded by pride still. Blood was blood. You didn't abandon family, even when they dragged you toward the abyss. One night, Darius called him into a quiet office above a kebab shop. The wolves used as a front. You know your brother's moving behind my back, Darius said calmly, sipping tea instead of whiskey. He thinks I don't hear the whispers. I hear everything. Callum swallowed. He's just blowing off steam. He'll come around. Darius leaned forward, his eyes hard. No, he won't. Men like Jamie don't come around. They burn. The question is, are you going to burn with him? Or are you going to stand where the fire can't reach? Callum's jaw tightened. He's my brother, and I respect that, Darius replied, but remember this. Loyalty to blood ends in coffins. Loyalty to power builds empires. Choose wisely. Callum walked out into the night, torn in two. Briggs moves pieces. Briggs sat in an unmarked car across the street from the kebab shop. Rain pattering against the windscreen. Julie sat beside him, jotting notes there. Splitting. Briggs muttered. Jamie's gathering muscle. Darius knows it. Callum's caught in the middle. Julie glanced at him. So what's the play? Briggs lit a cigarette, exhaling smoke through the cracked window. We don't push too hard. We feed Jamie's paranoia, make him think Darius is plotting against him faster than he really is. If Jamie jumps too early, Darius will crush him, and we'll pick up the pieces. Julie frowned. And if Darius jumps first? Briggs gave a humorless smile. Then we let the wolves eat each other. Either way, the pack gets smaller. First blood. It happened sooner than anyone expected. Jamie's crew torched one of Darius's drug warehouses in Cheetham Hill. Fire lit up the night sky, black smoke curling into the clouds. £500,000 worth of gear went up in flames the next morning. Darius walked the ashes with Callum at his side. He didn't shout, he didn't rage, he simply looked at the ruins. Then at Callum. Your brother thinks he's clever, Darius said softly, but he's just signed his death warrant. Callum swallowed hard. That evening, 2 of Jamie's men were found in a skip near the canal, throats slit, eyes wide open. The wolves had rules. Blood was answered with blood. City on edge. Manchester felt it. The streets hummed with tension, pubs filled with whispers, clubs with nervous glances. People could smell when a gang war was about to explode, and they knew to keep their heads down. The press called it a power struggle to the people living in it. It felt like walking on glass, waiting for it to shatter underfoot. Briggs knew the city was holding its breath, and he also knew the first gunshot would send it all spiraling out of control. He gathered his team. We're not stopping a war, we're steering it. Our job isn't to keep them alive, it's to make sure when the dust settles, there's nothing left of them to crawl back. Jamie strikes back. Jamie wasn't blind. He knew Darius was moving against him. He could feel it in the streets, see it in the way men looked at him, calculating some were already slipping away, drawn back into Darius's orbits. So Jamie decided to make a statement one night, outside a popular club in Deansgate. Darius's lieutenant, an old Doyle man turned alley, was gunned down in the street. A dozen witnesses, a dozen phones filming. Blood splattered across the pavement. Jamie wanted everyone to see, and they did. The city erupted. Retaliations came. Fast cars torched, safe houses raided, more bodies turning up by the week. The wolves were no longer a united pack. They were predators circling each other. Teeth-bared and Briggs, watching from the shadows, finally saw his opening. The raid. Julie burst into Briggs's office one morning, a file in hand. "We've got it. Jamie's meeting his crew in a mill near Ardwick tonight. Unregistered weapons shipment." Briggs didn't hesitate to get the team. "No uniforms. We go in hard, but quiet. Let's take his legs out from under him." That night, they moved black vans, silent boots on wet concrete, rifles at the ready. Briggs felt his heart hammer as they breached the mill, but Jamie wasn't surprised. Gunfire erupted instantly, echoing through the empty building. Bullets sparked against metal, men shouting, the smell of gunpowder filling the air. Briggs dove behind cover, barking orders. He saw Jamie through the chaos, gun in hand, firing like a man already halfway to Helen. The chaos. Jamie escaped. His men didn't. Half were dead. The rest dragged off in cuffs. Briggs stood in the aftermath, chest heaving, ears ringing. Not a victory, not yet, but the first blow had landed. Jamie on the run after the raid. Jamie was a hunted animal, his crew gutted, his allies turning away. He moved from squat to squat, never sleeping in the same place twice. But his pride burned hotter than ever. He wasn't done. He couldn't be. "If I go down," he snarled to Callum one night, "I'm taking Darius with me." Callum stared at him, torn apart. "You've already lost, Jamie. Darius owns this city now." Jamie's eyes glinted with madness. "Then I'll burn the city down." Jamie Price had become a ghost. He slept on damp mattresses in abandoned flats, ate cold takeaway left behind by sympathizers, and trusted no one, not even the faces he'd grown up with. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Darius's calm stare across that table, the way the man had dared him to strike, and every time, Jamie's rage flared hotter. "Manchester's mine," he muttered to himself in the dark. "Not his, not anyone's mine." But ghosts couldn't rule cities. Ghosts only haunted them. His men were thinning. Those not killed in the Ardwick raid were either locked up or had switched sides, sliding under Darius's umbrella for protection. Callum still came to see him, sneaking out in the night. But Jamie could see the doubt written on his brother's face. "You're looking at me like I'm already dead," Jamie snarled one night. Callum shook his head. "You've made yourself dead, Jamie. You just haven't hit the ground yet." Jamie slammed a fist into the wall. "Then I'll take Darius with me when I fall." Darius consolidates while Jamie skulked in shadows. Darius flourished. The wolves' operations were more organized than ever. Drugs flowed smoothly through the clubs again. Guns were stashed safely across the city. And the police, despite Briggs's best efforts, still struggled to pin anything solid on him. Wasn't just running a gang anymore. He was running an empire. Bet he hadn't forgotten Jamie. "Keep him alive." Darius ordered one of his lieutenants. "Let him fester. A wounded animal teaches the rest of the pack not to stray." It was cold strategy. Killing Jamie outright would risk martyring him, letting him unravel slowly. Publicly, that sent a stronger message. Briggs's net detective Briggs wasn't celebrating every raid, every arrest, every seizure. It all chipped away, but never toppled. Darius was too clever, too careful. "We've got Jamie on the ropes," Julie reminded him one evening. Files spread across their desks. "He's erratic, reckless. If we keep the pressure on, he'll make a mistake big enough to bury him." Briggs took a long drag from his cigarette. "And Darius?" Julie hesitated. "He's stronger than ever." Briggs nodded grimly. "Which means when Jamie falls, Darius will be untouchable. The pack will be his, and the city's ours in name only." He stubbed the cigarette out hard. "We can't just chase ghosts. We need to cut the head off both heads. One rainy night, Callum met Briggs in secret. They sat in Briggs's car, the windows fogging with their breath, silence hanging heavy. You wanted to see me, Briggs said carefully. Callum's eyes were hollow. Jamie's lost. He won't stop until he's dead, but Darius, he'll never stop. He'll build something worse than Doyle ever had. Briggs studied him. So what are you saying? Callum swallowed. I'm saying maybe it's time someone close to them helps you. Briggs's pulse quickened. You'd betray them? Callum's jaw clenched. I'm not betraying. I'm surviving, and if I don't choose soon, I'll go down with one of them. Briggs leaned closer. Then choose carefully, because when the wolves die, there won't be a second chance. Jamie's last stand. It happened in home. Jamie had gathered what little crew he had left. Half a dozen desperate men with more anger than sense, and armed them to the teeth. His plan was suicide, but he called it destiny. We hit Darius at his heart, he told them, eyes blazing. His club in Deansgate tonight. No more waiting, no more hiding. We storm it. We burn it. We kill him in front of his people. The men cheered. Hollow and nervous word leaked, as it was meant to when Jamie's battered car screeched up outside the club that night, guns blazing. He expected chaos instead. He found Darius waiting, calm, prepared. The trap snapped. Shotgun fire erupted. Thunderous in the night, Jamie's men fell fast. Cut down in the street, Jamie fought like a demon, screaming, shooting wildly. But the end was already written, pinned behind a burning car. Blood seeping from his arm, Jamie looked up to see Darius walking toward him. Slow and deliberate. Did you really think you could take my city with fire? Darius said softly. Almost sadly. Fire burns out stone, endures. Jamie spat blood. You're not a king. You're just another snake in the pit. Darius crouched, eyes cold. And you were just another wolf who forgot who leads the pack. The last thing Jamie saw was Darius's gun, raised and steady. One shot, clean. Final news spread fast. Another gang shootout, another Price brother dead. The papers called it the inevitable end of a violent career, but in the shadows, the message was clear. The wolves had only one leader. Now Callum vanished from sight. Some said he fled Manchester. Others whispered he bent the knee to Darius. Briggs suspected both could be true. Briggs himself sat in his office long after the news broke, staring at the city lights. He should have felt relief, one wolf down, but he knew better. Darius hadn't just survived. He'd won. Julie came in quietly. We got Jamie, but Darius. Briggs didn't look at her. Darius is the real story and the real fight. He lit another cigarette, the smoke curling upward. The wolves devoured themselves now. We're left with the wolf who learned how to wear a crown. Jamie Price's death didn't shock Manchester, it relieved it. Pubs buzzed with half-joking toasts. Good riddance, taxi drivers muttered about bloody time. Mothers walking their kids to school whispered warnings about staying clear of Deansgate. Jamie had been chaos given flesh. Now he was gone, and people wanted to believe things might settle down, but some knew better, because when chaos dies, order fills the gap. And Darius Khan wasn't building peace. He was building a kingdom. Darius's new order. Darius stood in the center of a crowded nightclub, champagne in one hand, music thundering through the speakers around him. Lieutenants laughed, dealers celebrated, girls danced, but Darius didn't smile. His mind was elsewhere. He saw Doyle's fall replaying in every toast. Doyle had thought himself untouchable. 2 kings fell when they got drunk on power. So Darius kept sober. He kept quiet, and he kept building through the docks. He tightened his grip on imports through accountants. He laundered millions through councilmen. He silenced regulation, and through Precisely reminded the streets who ruled the wolves weren't just a gang anymore. They were infrastructure, and Manchester, whether it knew it or not, was now his city. Briggs seized the shift. Detective Briggs sat in his car outside the same club, cigarette glowing in the dark. He watched the doors swing open and shut, watched the suits and the muscle file in and out. Julie sat beside him, scribbling notes. Jamie's gone. The pack should have fallen apart, but look at it, She nodded at the club stronger than ever. Briggs exhaled smoke. That's because Jamie was fire. Fire burns itself out. Darius is stone lasts. Julie frowned. So what do we do? Briggs's eyes narrowed. We stop thinking like cops. Cops chase crimes. Kings don't leave crimes to chase. They leave legacies. We cut his foundations, not his men. Julie tilted her head, meaning. Briggs tapped Ash out the window, meaning if we can't jail him on blood, we jail him on bricks and mortar. Callum in the shadows. Callum. Price drifted. He didn't attend Jamie's funeral. There was no funeral. Just a body buried, quick and quiet. Police watching the whole time, and Callum disappeared into back alleys and quiet pubs. His name whispered, but rarely seen. Some said he'd gone soft. Others said he was biding his time one night. Briggs found him. The detective slid into the booth opposite him. The pub empty, but for the hum of a broken jukebox you've been hard to find. Briggs, said Callum, sipped his pint, eyes tired, not hiding, just not ready. Briggs studied him. You were ready enough to warn me about Jamie. Why? Go quiet now. Callum's voice was low, almost ashamed, because Darius offered me a choice, stand with him, or fall like my brother. And what did you choose? Callum looked up, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. Survival, for now. Briggs leaned closer. Survival's not enough. Callum, not with a man like Darius. He doesn't share power. He doesn't forgive weakness. He'll use you until you're empty. Then he'll bury you next to Jamie. Callum's silence said he already knew. Darius makes his move. 2 weeks later. A rival gang in Salford vanished overnight. No gunfights. No bodies in the street. Just silence. Whispers spread. Their leaders had been seen entering a warehouse near the docks. None were seen. Leaving it was cleaner, quieter, more efficient than Doyle or Jamie had ever managed. Darius wasn't ruling with noise. He was ruling with inevitability. Briggs felt it like a noose tightening around the city at the morning briefing. The superintendent snapped. You've had years. Briggs, Doyle's gone. Jamie's gone. And still this con runs free. Where are the charges? Briggs bit down his temper. Charges won't stick until we make them stick. You want him behind bars for a month, or gone for good. The superintendent glared. I want him caged before the Home Office tears this force apart. When the meeting ended, Julie pulled Briggs aside. They're losing patience. Briggs lit another cigarette. So is the city, and when patience runs out, that's when kings fall. The breaking point. Darius knew his empire was strong, but he also knew it was fragile in one place. Callum, the younger Price brother, had value. Respect from Jamie's old crew. The kind of loyalty you couldn't buy. But Darius sensed hesitation in him. Doubt, creeping through cracks. So he called Callum into his office. Do you know why your brother failed? Darius asked. Quietly. Callum shifted. Because he was reckless. Darius nodded. Because he mistook noise for power. Power isn't noise. Power is silence. Power is when men fear to speak your name because it echoes louder in their heads than in the streets. Callum said nothing. Darius leaned in. But doubt. Doubt is poison, and poison spreads. If you ever find yourself doubting me, Callum, remember what became of your brother. The warning hung in the air like smoke. Hand. Callum walked out knowing his time was running short. Briggs plays his hand that same night. Briggs moved through surveillance, through informants, through Callum's subtle hints. He found the key. The docks containers moved under false manifests. Shipments marked as electronics or textiles, but inside guns, drugs. Cash cut the docks. Briggs told Julie cut his empire off at the root. If he can't move goods, he can't pay men, and if he can't pay men, the wolves stop howling. Julie frowned. It'll take everything we've got. Raids. Warrants. The lot. Briggs's face hardened. Then we use everything. This is the strike. As the rain fell over Manchester, the city braced itself again. Darius Khan sat in his club, watching his empire hum. Detective Briggs sat in his office, planning the strike that could end it. 10. Callum Price stood in the middle, torn between loyalty and survival, knowing whichever choice he made, blood would follow. The wolves were no longer many. They were one, but sometimes one wolf was more dangerous than a Hundred and Briggs knew the real war was just beginning. The incident room was tense. Maps of the Manchester Ship Canal and the Salford docks were pinned to the walls. Red string stretched between photos of warehouses, faces of lieutenants, and container numbers. Briggs stood at the front, cigarette in hand, voice hoarse but steady. Darius Khan doesn't run this city with guns or knives, he runs it with these. He jabbed the cigarette at a photo of stacked containers. Every crate that comes through here feeds his empire drugs. Cash, weapons take the docks, and we take his heart. Julie stepped forward. Flipping through files, our CI confirmed a shipment's coming in Thursday marked as textiles manifest forged its weapons. Enough to arm half the wolves. A murmur rippled through the room. Briggs nodded. We don't get another chance like this. We move in heavy, but quiet. We seize the containers, freeze his accounts, and put cuffs on whoever we catch standing guard. We cut the blood supply. Darius bleeds out. One of the younger detectives frowned. And if Darius shows up himself? Briggs's jaw tightened. Then we bring down the King. Callum's Crossroads. That same night, Callum Price sat alone in a deserted flat, staring at the burner phone on the table. One call to Briggs, and the raid would hit harder. One call to Darius, and he could warn him, prove loyalty. He poured himself a whiskey, the glass trembling in his hand. Jamie's voice haunted him. We take the city. Now Darius's warning echoed. Doubt is poison. And Briggs's gravel growl lingered. If you don't choose soon, you'll go down with them. The phone buzzed. A single text from Briggs. Thursday, 3 a.m. Containers 12 to 15. Callum stared. His decision would decide everything. The Radla docks were silent under the drizzle. Cranes looming like skeletons against the night sky. Black vans rolled in, tires whispering over wet tarmac. Dozens of armed officers fanned out, weapons drawn. Shadows moving between stacked containers. Briggs moved at the front, shotgun tucked under his arm. Julie at his side. His pulse was steady. Years of waiting had led to this. They reached containers 1 to 15. Locks cut, doors wrenched open inside. Crates stacked to the ceiling, filled not with textiles but rifles, assault weapons, crates of ammunition. Enough to arm a small army. Briggs's breath caught. They had him. They finally had him. And then the gunfire began. The wolves. Defend figures emerged from the darkness. Wolves, armed and ready. Bullets ripped through the night, sparking off metal, echoing across the water. Officers dove for cover, shouting orders. Briggs fired back, the recoil jarring his shoulder. Julie crouched beside him, returning fire. They knew we were coming, she shouted. Briggs's gut twisted. Betrayal. The question was by who? Through the chaos, he spotted him. Darius, standing calm at the edge of the dock, trenchcoat fluttering in the wind, watching the battle unfold like a man studying a chessboard. Their eyes met across the firestorm, and for the first time, Briggs saw something close to respect in Darius's gaze. Callum's choice amid the chaos. Callum appeared, rifle in hand, face pale under the floodlights. He wasn't shooting, just standing between the two worlds, tearing themselves apart. One of Darius's lieutenants yelled, "Callum, with us. Protect the shipment." But then a voice rang from the other side. "Julie's Callum. Now's your chance. Help us finish this." Callum froze, sweat dripped down his temple, fingers tightening on the trigger. Jamie's ghost whispered, "For blood." Darius's cold warning rang in his head. Briggs's weary eyes begged for an end. The city held its breath, and then Callum raised his rifle, aimed it at Darius. He fired. The shot cracked through the night. Darius staggered, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming across his coat. Wolves roared in fury. Officers surged forward. Gunfire exploded into chaos. The battle raged for minutes that felt like hours. But the wolves weren't ready for a war on two fronts, bows pressing hard. Their leader wounded, their trust shattered by dawn. The docks were littered with spent shells, bought, and broken crates. Dozens of wolves were in custody, millions in weapons seized, and Darius Khan, bleeding and furious, was vanished into the city. Before Briggs could put cuffs on him, Callum sat on the ground, hands behind his head, officers shouting at him. But his eyes never left the horizon where Darius had disappeared. He had chosen. But the war was far from over. Briggs's realization, as the sun rose over the canal. Briggs stood among the wreckage, rain mixing with blood on the ground. Julie approached. Exhausted but alive. "We broke him," she said, almost smiling. "The docks are ours. His empire's crippled." Briggs lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "Crippled isn't dead." He looked at the smoke curling into the sky somewhere out there. Darius was still moving, still planning, still dangerous, and now he had a reason for vengeance. "The wolves are wounded," Briggs muttered, "but a wounded wolf's the most dangerous kind."